Elena Rossi thought her biggest problem was scraping together rent money for her rundown apartment, until a mysterious little girl whispered 4 words that would shatter her ordinary life forever. "Can you be my new mom?" What Elena didn't know was that this innocent child belonged to Marco DeLuca, one of the city's most feared Mafia bosses, and her single act of kindness had just painted a target on her back. Within hours, her apartment would be ransacked, her safety compromised, and her heart stolen by a man whose enemies would kill to destroy anyone he loved. But when rival crime families start closing in and Elena discovers the shocking truth about how Marco's first wife really died, she'll have to decide, is love worth dying for, or is she walking straight into the same deadly trap that claimed the woman before her? The little girl's drawings of their perfect family might be beautiful, but in Marco's world, perfect families don't survive. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to take a turn darker than the city's most dangerous streets. The fluorescent lights above the diner buzzed like angry wasps. Elena Rossi wiped down the sticky counter for the 100th time that night, her tired eyes burning from the harsh glare. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., but time seemed frozen in this place. Her phone vibrated against her hip. The screen showed her landlord's name, and her stomach dropped. She let it go to voicemail, knowing exactly what Mr. Peterson wanted to tell her. The rent. Always the rent. "Elena, table 6 needs more coffee," called Jake, the night manager, from behind the grill. His tone carried that familiar edge of impatience. She grabbed the coffee pot, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. 3 double shifts this week, and still not enough money. Never enough money. Table 6 held a trucker who'd been nursing the same cup for 2 hours. He looked up as she approached, his weathered face kind but tired. "Thanks, sweetheart," he said softly. "You look beat. When's your shift end?" "Midnight." Elena managed a smile. It wasn't his fault her life was falling apart. The bell above the door chimed, letting in a gust of cold October air. Elena glanced up to see another late-night regular shuffling in, Mrs. Chen, who worked the overnight shift at the hospital nearby. "Just coffee, hun," Mrs. Chen said, settling into her usual booth. "Black, strong enough to wake the dead." Elena poured the coffee, her mind wandering to the stack of bills waiting on her kitchen table. Electric bill, phone bill, and underneath them all, that final notice from the landlord. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the name on the screen made her heart race with worry. "Luca!" She stepped into the narrow hallway near the restrooms and answered. "Elena?" Her little brother's voice was weak, raspy. "I'm sorry to call so late, but—" "What's wrong?" She pressed the phone closer to her ear, trying to block out the diner's noise. "I'm out of my inhaler. The backup one, too. I used the last of it this morning, and I can't breathe good." Elena's chest tightened. Luca had asthma, bad asthma that had gotten worse since their parents died in the car accident 3 years ago. She'd been taking care of him ever since, working every job she could find to keep them afloat. "Okay, baby, it's okay," she whispered, though panic clawed at her throat. "I'll get you a new one first thing tomorrow." "The pharmacy said it's $120 without insurance." Elena closed her eyes. She had maybe $40 in her checking account. Maybe. "Don't worry about that. I'll figure it out. Use the breathing exercises we practiced, okay? In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. "Okay," Luca said, but she could hear the wheeze in his voice getting worse. After hanging up, Elena leaned against the wall and fought back tears. She couldn't afford to break down. Not here. Not now. "Elena," Jake's voice cut through her thoughts. "Customer at table 3 wants his check." She wiped her eyes quickly and returned to work. The next hour crawled by like thick honey. Every customer seemed to move in slow motion. Every order felt like it took forever to fill. Finally, midnight arrived. Elena hung up her apron with shaking hands and grabbed her thin jacket from the employee closet. The October air bit through the worn fabric as she stepped outside. Rain had started while she was inside, not the gentle kind that refreshed the earth, but the cold, mean kind that soaked through clothes in seconds. Elena pulled her jacket tighter and hurried toward the bus stop. The street lights cast yellow pools on the wet pavement. Her sneakers, already worn thin at the soles, squelched with each step. By the time she reached the bus stop, her hair was plastered to her head and water dripped from her nose. The bench under the small shelter was already occupied by an elderly man sleeping rough. Elena didn't wake him. Instead, she stood at the edge of the shelter, watching for the late bus that might or might not come. Her phone buzzed, another voicemail from Mr. Peterson. With a sinking heart, she played it back. Elena, this is your final notice. If I don't have the rent money by Friday, you're out. I'm sorry, but I can't carry you anymore. Business is business. Friday. That was in 3 days. Elena stared at the empty street, rain blurring her vision. How had everything gotten so bad? After her parents died, she'd tried so hard to keep things together for Luca. She'd dropped out of college, worked multiple jobs, scraped by month after month. But it was never enough. A car drove past, its tires sending up a wave of dirty water that splashed her legs. The cold seeped through her jeans, and she shivered violently. 20 minutes later, the bus finally arrived. Elena climbed aboard, fishing quarters from her pocket for the fare. The driver, a woman with kind eyes, looked her up and down. Rough night, honey? Yeah, Elena managed. Rough night. She found a seat near the back and watched the city slide past through rain-streaked windows. Empty buildings, closed shops, dark apartments where normal people slept normal lives. The next morning came too soon. Elena had managed maybe 4 hours of sleep before her alarm screamed at her to get up. She had the day shift at the diner today, then the evening shift at the grocery store. If she was lucky, she'd make enough for Luca's medicine. But as she was getting dressed, her phone rang. Her friend Monica's name flashed on the screen. "Girl, I have the perfect solution to your problems," Monica announced without any greeting. "Unless it involves a suitcase full of cash, I doubt it," Elena said, pulling on her work uniform. "Better, a date with a rich guy." Elena paused, one arm halfway through her sleeve. "Monica, I don't have time for—" "Listen to me. My cousin works at this fancy law firm downtown, right? And there's this guy, successful, handsome, looking for someone real. Someone not like those fake society girls he usually meets. I can't afford to date anyone right now." "That's the beauty of it. He's taking you to Romano's. You know that expensive Italian place? When's the last time you had a real meal?" Elena's stomach growled as if summoned. When was the last time? She honestly couldn't remember. "I don't know, Monica. I'm not exactly in a good place for romance right now. One dinner, 2 hours max. He seemed really nice when I talked to him. And Elena—" Monica's voice softened. "You deserve something good in your life. Just once." Elena closed her eyes. The rent money, Luca's medicine, the stack of bills, they all seemed to press down on her shoulders like a weight she couldn't carry anymore. "What's his name?" "David. David Harrison. He's a junior partner at some big firm, drives a BMW. A BMW. Elena tried to imagine herself in a car that probably cost more than she made in 2 years. "Okay," she heard herself saying. "One dinner." "Yes, tonight, 7 o'clock at Romano's. Wear something nice." After Monica hung up, Elena stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. Something nice. She owned exactly 3 dresses, all bought secondhand. One had a small stain on the front, one was too big from when she'd lost weight during a particularly bad month, and one, a simple black dress, might work if she was careful with it. The day passed in a blur of coffee orders and customer complaints. Elena's mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. Maybe Monica was right. Maybe she deserved one nice meal. One evening where she didn't have to worry about money or bills, or whether DeLuca was breathing okay. By 6 o'clock, she was home, showering quickly and trying to make herself look presentable. The black dress fit well enough, though it was a little too loose in some places. She didn't own any makeup except an old tube of lipstick her mom had given her years ago. Looking at herself in the mirror, Elena felt like she was pretending to be someone else. Someone who belonged in fancy restaurants and drove nice cars. Someone whose biggest worry wasn't whether she could afford her little brother's medicine. But for tonight, maybe that was okay. Maybe pretending would be enough. Romano's sat on a corner downtown, all warm lights and white tablecloths visible through large windows. Elena stood outside for a moment, watching well-dressed people inside eating food that probably cost more than she made in a week. She took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy glass door. The hostess looked her up and down with barely concealed judgment. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting David Harrison," Elena said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Of course. Right this way." Elena followed the hostess through the restaurant, acutely aware of her worn shoes on the polished floor. Other diners looked elegant and comfortable, like they belonged in places like this. David Harrison sat at a corner table checking his phone. He looked up as she approached, and Elena saw his expression change slightly. Not quite disappointment, but something close to it. "Elena?" He stood, extending a manicured hand. "David Harrison." "Nice to meet you," Elena said, shaking his hand and noticing how soft it was. Like he'd never done a day of physical work in his life. They sat, and David immediately picked up the wine menu. "I took the liberty of ordering some wine. Bordeaux. I hope you don't mind." Elena had never heard of Bordeaux, but she nodded. "That sounds nice." The waiter appeared as if summoned, pouring dark red wine into glasses that probably cost more than Elena's monthly phone bill. She took a small sip and tried not to make a face at the bitter taste. "So," David said, settling back in his chair, "Monica told me you work in food service?" The way he said it made Elena feel smaller. "I'm a waitress at Murphy's Diner." "Ah." He picked up his wine glass, swirling the liquid like she'd seen people do in movies. "That must be interesting." Elena forced a smile. "It pays the bills." "Barely, I imagine." Heat rose in Elena's cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral. "It's honest work." "Oh, of course, I didn't mean to imply otherwise." But his tone suggested exactly that. "I just meant that someone like you, with your looks, you could probably do better. Have you thought about modeling? Or maybe something in retail at a nice store?" Elena set down her wine glass carefully. "Someone like me?" "Pretty, young. You just seem like you could aim higher, that's all." The waiter returned, and David ordered the most expensive items on the menu without asking Elena what she wanted. He chose for both of them, speaking to the waiter as if Elena wasn't there. "So tell me about yourself," David said once the waiter left. "Family? Education?" "I have a younger brother," Elena said carefully. "I take care of him, and I went to college for a while, but let me guess. Money problems?" Elena nodded, hating how exposed she felt. "That's the problem with people who don't plan ahead," David said, cutting into the bread the waiter had brought. "Financial literacy is so important. My father always said, If you're not moving up, you're moving down. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. Sometimes things happen that are beyond your control. Sure, but there are always options, always ways to better yourself if you really want to. The food arrived. Some kind of fish Elena couldn't pronounce and vegetables arranged like pieces of art. It probably tasted amazing, but every bite felt like sand in her mouth. David talked about himself for the next hour. His job, his car, his condo downtown, his plans to make partner before he turned 35. He asked Elena questions, but only to set up his own stories about how much more successful he was than other people. "The thing is," he said, cutting into his fish with surgical precision, "in this world, you're either successful or you're not. There's no middle ground. People who work in diners and grocery stores, no offense, they're just not driven enough to succeed." Elena's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "My parents worked hard every day of their lives. They weren't successful by your definition, but they were good people who took care of their family." "Were?" "They died in a car accident 3 years ago." David's expression didn't change much. "I'm sorry for your loss, but see, that's exactly what I mean about planning. Did they have life insurance? A college fund set up? Financial protection for their kids?" Elena stared at him. Actually stared. "They were killed by a drunk driver. They didn't choose to leave us." "Right, but if they'd planned better, you and your brother would have been taken care of. Instead, you're working minimum wage jobs and struggling to get by." Something cold and hard settled in Elena's stomach. She set down her fork and reached for her purse. "Where are you going?" David asked. "Home." "But we haven't finished dinner, and I was going to suggest we get some drinks after this." Elena stood, clutching her purse. "Thank you for dinner, but I think we want different things." David laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, don't be so sensitive. I'm just trying to help you see the bigger picture here." "The bigger picture?" "Yeah, look, you're pretty enough, but you're obviously from a different background. If we're going to make this work, you'll need to improve yourself. Better clothes, better job, maybe take some classes on how to talk to people in professional settings." Elena felt heat rising from her chest to her face. "Make this work?" "Well, sure. I mean, I could help you. Introduce you to some people, maybe help you find a better job, but you'd need to be willing to change." Elena looked down at him sitting there with his perfect hair and his expensive suit and his complete certainty that she was less than him, less worthy, less human. "You know what, David? You're right. We are from different backgrounds." Her voice was steady now, calm. "I was raised to treat people with respect, to understand that someone's job doesn't define their worth, to know that kindness matters more than money." She pulled a $20 bill from her purse, money she couldn't afford to spend, but her pride wouldn't let her walk away without paying. "This should cover my part of the meal." David looked at the 20 like it was contaminated. "Elena, come on. Don't be like this. I'm offering to help you better yourself." "I don't need to be better, David. I need to be treated better." She walked away, her chin high and her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard David call out something about her being ungrateful, but she didn't turn around. The hostess watched her leave with the same judgmental expression she'd had when Elena arrived. The doorman held the door open, and Elena found herself back on the street. The rain had started again, heavier now. Elena stood under the restaurant's awning, shivering and trying not to cry. She'd spent $20 she didn't have on a meal. She couldn't finish with a man who thought she was worth less than the dirt on his expensive shoes. Her phone buzzed. A text from DeLuca. "Feeling better tonight. Hope your date went well. Love you, sis." That's when the tears finally came. Elena pressed her back against the restaurant's brick wall and let them fall, mixing with the rain that blew under the awning. She was 28 years old, working 2 jobs, barely keeping herself and her brother alive, and she'd just been told by someone who'd known her for 2 hours that she wasn't good enough, that she needed to change everything about herself to be worthy of basic human respect. A bus wheezed to a stop across the street, and Elena ran through the rain to catch it. She was soaked by the time she climbed aboard, water dripping from her hair and her dress clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The bus driver, the same kind woman from the night before, looked at her with concern. Another rough night? Elena managed a weak smile. Yeah, another rough night. She found a seat and watched the city blur past through rain-streaked windows. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to pay for Luca's medicine. Tomorrow she'd have to face Mr. Peterson and try to negotiate more time for the rent. But tonight, she was just a woman in a wet dress on a late bus, wondering if she'd ever find someone who thought she was worth loving just as she was. The bus pulled up to her stop, and Elena stepped back into the rain. Her apartment building looked even more run down than usual, its gray walls stained with water damage and neglect. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her door, her wet shoes squeaking on each step. The hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and broken dreams. Elena fumbled with her keys, her cold fingers not wanting to cooperate. Finally, the lock turned, and she pushed open the door to her small apartment. But something was wrong. The door swung open too easily, like it hadn't been properly latched. Elena's blood went cold. She always made sure to lock the deadbolt before leaving. She stepped inside carefully, her heart pounding. In the dim light from the hallway, she could see that her living room had been torn apart. Couch cushions thrown on the floor, books scattered, her small TV pushed off its stand. Elena's hand shook as she reached for the light switch. When the overhead bulb flickered on, she gasped. Her apartment had been completely ransacked. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the destruction. Her few belongings were scattered across the floor like broken promises. The small bookshelf her father had built lay on its side. Her mother's ceramic angel, the only valuable thing she owned, smashed into pieces near the window. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My apartment's been robbed. Everything's destroyed. Are you in the apartment now, ma'am? Elena looked around the chaos, suddenly realizing how stupid she'd been to walk inside. Yes, but I don't think anyone's here now. Please exit the building and wait outside. Officers will be there shortly. Elena backed toward the door, her eyes scanning every corner. In her tiny bedroom, she could see her mattress flipped over, her clothes pulled from the dresser. Even her bathroom had been searched, toiletries scattered across the floor, medicine cabinet hanging open. But what made her stomach drop was what she didn't see missing. Her ancient laptop still sat on the kitchen counter. The $20 in emergency cash she kept hidden in a coffee can was still there. Even her grandmother's wedding ring, which she kept in a jewelry box on her dresser, remained untouched. This wasn't a robbery. This was something else. Elena grabbed her jacket and fled downstairs to wait on the sidewalk. The rain had slowed to a cold drizzle, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced through possibilities. Who would want to search her apartment? She had no enemies, no ex-boyfriends angry enough to do this, no debts to dangerous people. 30 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers got out, a tired-looking woman about Elena's age and an older man who moved like he'd seen too much of everything. You the one who called about the break-in? The woman asked. Yes, Elena Rossi. I live in 3B. They followed her upstairs, and Elena watched their faces as they surveyed the damage. The older cop, whose name tag read Martinez, shook his head. Definitely looks like someone was searching for something specific, he said. You notice anything missing? That's the weird part. Nothing valuable is gone. My laptop, some cash, even jewelry. It's all still here. Officer Martinez exchanged a look with his partner. Any idea what they might have been looking for? I don't own anything worth searching for, Elena said helplessly. I work at a diner and a grocery store. I don't have enemies or secrets or anything. The younger officer, whose name tag said Chen, was photographing the scene. When's the last time you saw the apartment normal? This morning when I left for work, around 10. And you were gone all day? Elena nodded, thinking about her disastrous date. I worked until 6, then went out for dinner. Got back about 20 minutes ago. Officer Martinez was examining the door frame. No signs of forced entry. Either they picked the lock or had a key. A chill ran down Elena's spine. I'm the only one with a key except my landlord. We'll need his contact information. Elena gave them Mr. Peterson's number, though she couldn't imagine him doing this. He wanted her rent money, not to destroy her apartment. After the officers left, promising to file a report but holding out little hope of finding the perpetrators, Elena stood alone in the wreckage of her life. Everything she owned was scattered or broken. The safe haven she'd worked so hard to maintain for herself, and DeLuca felt violated and dangerous. She spent the next 3 hours cleaning up, salvaging what she could, and throwing away the rest. By 2 a.m., the apartment looked almost normal again, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching her, studying her, looking for something she didn't even know she had. She barely slept that night, jumping at every sound in the building. When her alarm went off at 7, she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. The morning shift at Murphy's Diner passed in a haze. Elena dropped 2 plates and spilled coffee on herself twice. Jake, the manager, kept giving her concerned looks but didn't say anything until her shift ended. You okay, Elena? You seem off today. Just tired, she lied. I'll be fine tomorrow. But as she was leaving the diner, Elena noticed a black car parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine running, just sitting there. When she looked directly at it, the car pulled away slowly. Her hands shook as she waited for the bus. Was someone following her? Was this connected to the break-in? Elena had read enough crime stories to know that normal people like her didn't usually get this kind of attention unless they'd stumbled into something dangerous. The bus ride home felt endless. Elena kept checking over her shoulder, looking for the black car or any other sign that she was being watched. By the time she reached her building, her nerves were completely shot. She was fishing for her keys when a voice behind her made her jump. Miss Rossi? Elena spun around to find a well-dressed man approaching. He was tall, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He didn't look threatening, but after last night, Elena wasn't taking any chances. Who's asking? My name is Matteo Ricci. I work for someone who'd like to meet with you. Elena's blood went cold. Meet with me about what? About the kindness you showed to a little girl yesterday evening. Yesterday evening, the blind date. But Elena hadn't been with any little girl yesterday. Wait. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena said carefully. Matteo smiled, and it seemed genuine. The girl in the alley behind Murphy's Diner, around midnight. You bought her hot chocolate. Elena's mind reeled. She hadn't been at the diner at midnight yesterday. She'd been on that awful date with David, then come straight home to find her apartment destroyed. I think you have me confused with someone else, she said. Matteo pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. Elena's breath caught. It was definitely her, standing outside Murphy's Diner with a small girl who looked maybe 7 years old. The child was soaked from rain, and Elena, Elena, who had no memory of this moment, was wrapping her own jacket around the little girl's shoulders. "I don't understand," Elena whispered. "May I suggest we continue this conversation somewhere more private?" Mateo gestured toward the black sedan now parked at the curb. Not the same one she'd seen earlier, but similar. "My employer is very eager to thank you properly for what you did." Elena stared at the photo again. The timestamp showed 12:17 a.m., but at 12:17 a.m. she'd been on the bus going home from Romano's. She was sure of it. "I'm sorry, but I really don't remember any of this." "Perhaps the stress of the evening affected your memory," Mateo suggested gently. "You'd had a difficult time at dinner, then found a child alone in the rain. You brought her inside, bought her something warm to drink. She was very frightened, but you calmed her down." None of this sounded familiar, but the photo was undeniable. That was definitely Elena, and she was definitely helping a little girl. What happened to her? The little girl? "She's safe now, but she's been asking for you. She told my employer that you were nice like a mama, and she'd like to see you again." Elena looked at the sedan, then back at Mateo. Every instinct told her to run, to get inside her building and lock the door. But something about the man's demeanor seemed sincere, and the photo showed her clearly helping a child in need. "Who's your employer?" "Someone who cares very much about his daughter's happiness." Elena's mind was spinning. His daughter. So the little girl was this man's child, and somehow Elena had helped her, and now the father wanted to meet her. "I don't usually get into cars with strangers," Elena said. "Of course not. Very wise." Mateo reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out an envelope. "Perhaps you'd prefer to meet in a public place." "My employer suggested the coffee shop on 5th Street. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock?" Elena took the envelope. Inside was a simple card with an address and time written in elegant handwriting. Below that, a single line. "Thank you for your kindness to Sofia." Sofia. The little girl's name was Sofia. "I work tomorrow," Elena said. "I believe your schedule has been cleared." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "What do you mean?" "You received a call this morning from your manager, didn't you? About not needing to come in tomorrow?" Elena stared at him. She had gotten a call from Jake around noon, saying they were overstaffed and she could have the day off. She'd been grateful for the break after her awful night. "How did you know about that?" "My employer has considerable influence," Mateo said simply. "He wanted to ensure you'd be available to meet." Now Elena was really scared. What kind of man had enough influence to manipulate her work schedule? And why would he go to that trouble just to thank her for helping his daughter? "I don't think this is a good idea," she said, taking a step back toward her building. "Miss Rossi." Mateo's voice was still gentle, but there was something underneath it now. Something that made Elena stop moving. "Sofia hasn't spoken since her mother died 6 months ago. Yesterday was the first time she's shown interest in anyone new. She drew you a picture." He pulled out another photo. This one showed a child's crayon drawing of 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing under what might have been a rainbow. At the bottom, written in a child's careful letters, were the words, "Elena is nice." Elena's heart clenched. Whatever was happening here, there was a little girl involved who had lost her mother and apparently found some comfort in Elena's presence. 2 o'clock, she said finally. "The coffee shop on 5th Street." Mateo smiled and handed her another envelope, this one thicker. "A small token of appreciation for your time." Elena opened it and nearly dropped it. The envelope contained more money than she made in 2 months, all hundreds, crisp and new. "I can't accept this." "It's not payment, Miss Rossi. It's a gift. Sofia's happiness is worth more than money to her father." Elena stared at the cash. This would pay for Luca's medicine, the rent, all her bills, and still leave enough for groceries. But accepting money from strangers, especially strangers with this kind of influence, felt dangerous. "Thank you, but no." She handed the envelope back. "If your employer wants to thank me, he can do it in person. Tomorrow at 2. Matteo looked surprised, then almost impressed. "He said you might refuse. He'll be pleased to know he was right." The black sedan pulled away, leaving Elena standing on the sidewalk with more questions than answers. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, checking over her shoulder twice to make sure no one was following. Inside, she spread the photos on her kitchen table and studied them. That was definitely her face, her clothes, her posture, but she had absolutely no memory of helping a little girl named Sofia. Elena pulled out her phone and checked the timestamps on her text messages from that night. She'd texted Monica at 11:45 complaining about the date, then nothing until she'd called Luca from the bus at 12:30. But according to the photo, she'd been at the diner at 12:17 helping a child. Elena rubbed her temples, trying to make sense of it all. Was it possible she'd blocked out the memory? Trauma could do that, she knew, and finding her apartment destroyed had certainly been traumatic. Or was there another explanation, one that involved people powerful enough to manipulate her work schedule and desperate enough to tear apart her apartment looking for something? Sleep didn't come easily that night. Elena found herself listening to every sound in the building, jumping at footsteps in the hallway and car doors slamming on the street. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of a little girl with sad eyes and a man in the shadows whose face she couldn't see. The next morning, Elena called in sick to the grocery store and spent the day trying to decide whether to go to the coffee shop meeting. Part of her wanted to run, pack up Luca, and disappear somewhere these people couldn't find them. But another part, the part that had seen a child's drawing with her name on it, couldn't walk away. At 1:45, Elena stood outside Cafe Luna on 5th Street, watching through the windows for any sign of danger. The place looked normal. College students on laptops, business people grabbing afternoon coffee, a few elderly couples sharing pastries. She'd chosen her clothes carefully: jeans, sneakers, a jacket with pockets where she could keep her phone and keys easily accessible. If she needed to run, she'd be ready. At exactly 2 o'clock, a black sedan pulled up outside the cafe. Elena's heart started racing as she watched 3 men get out. One was Matteo, who she recognized from yesterday. The other 2 looked like bodyguards, big, alert, scanning the street like they expected trouble. But it was the 4th man who made Elena's breath catch. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and the kind of bone structure that belonged in magazines. But it wasn't his looks that stopped Elena cold. It was the way he moved, like he owned not just the space around him, but the air itself. People on the street instinctively stepped aside as he passed, though he never looked at them directly. This was a man used to being obeyed, used to being feared. Elena's survival instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay still as he approached the cafe entrance. When his eyes met hers through the window, she felt like a deer caught in headlights. His eyes were dark, almost black, and completely unreadable. They studied her face for a long moment before he nodded once. Whether in greeting or acknowledgement, she couldn't tell. The door chimed as he entered the cafe. Elena watched him scan the room quickly, noting exits and potential threats in a way that told her this man lived in a dangerous world. "Miss Rossi." His voice was deep, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Thank you for coming." Up close, he was even more intimidating. Elena had to tilt her head back to look at his face, and when she did, she saw something unexpected there. Exhaustion. This man who carried himself like a king looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "You wanted to thank me for helping your daughter," Elena said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I did. I am Marco DeLuca." He gestured toward a corner table, away from the other customers. "Would you join me?" Elena followed him to the table, acutely aware of Matteo and the other men positioning themselves near the entrance. Whatever this was about, Marco DeLuca wasn't taking any chances. "Would you like something to drink?" Marco asked as they sat down. "Coffee's fine." He signaled the waitress with barely a glance, and she hurried over like she'd been waiting for his command. "2 coffees, please," he said politely, "and perhaps some of those pastries in the case." When they were alone again, Marco folded his hands on the table and looked directly at Elena. "I owe you a debt, Miss Rossi." "For helping a little girl, that's what any decent person would do." "In my experience, decent people are rare." His voice carried a weight that suggested he'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Sofia has been difficult since her mother's death. She doesn't speak, doesn't trust strangers, doesn't allow anyone close except family. But Matteo tells me she actually smiled when you gave her your jacket." Elena studied his face, looking for clues about what kind of man he really was. His suit was expensive, but not flashy. His watch was simple, but probably cost more than her car. Everything about him suggested power and money, but controlled power. Restrained money. "What happened to her mother?" Marco's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "An accident." The way he said it made Elena sure it hadn't been an accident at all, but she didn't push. Instead, she thought about the little girl from the photo, soaked from rain, alone in an alley, clinging to a stranger for comfort. "Where's Sofia now?" "At home, with her caregiver. She wanted to come today, but—" Marco paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My life involves certain risks. I don't expose her to strangers unless I'm sure they're safe." "And are you?" "Sure, I'm safe." Marco's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "I know you work 2 jobs to support your younger brother. I know you have no criminal record, no dangerous associations, no history of violence. I know you turned down a considerable amount of money yesterday rather than accept charity from a stranger." Elena's blood ran cold. "You investigated me." "I investigate everyone who comes into contact with my daughter." "But I don't even remember meeting her." "Which is why I had to be sure you weren't working for someone who means us harm." The waitress returned with their coffee and a plate of pastries that Elena couldn't even think about eating. Her stomach was twisted in knots. "Who would want to harm a little girl?" she asked. Marco picked up his coffee cup, and Elena noticed his hands were scarred, old cuts across the knuckles, a thin line along one wrist. These were hands that had seen violence. "I have enemies, Miss Rossi, people who would use Sofia to hurt me if they could." Elena set down her cup carefully. "What exactly do you do, Mr. DeLuca?" For a long moment, Marco just looked at her. Elena had the sense he was making some kind of calculation, weighing risks and benefits in his mind. "I run a family business," he said finally. "What kind of business?" "The kind that makes enemies." Elena's heart was pounding now. She'd seen enough movies, read enough books to recognize the careful way he was speaking. The bodyguards, the investigation, the mysterious enemies who might target a child. This wasn't a normal family business. "I should go," she said, starting to stand. "Please." Marco's voice stopped her. 5 more minutes. Against her better judgment, Elena sat back down. Sofia drew you another picture, Marco said, pulling out his phone. He showed her a photo of a new drawing, 3 stick figures this time, holding hands under a house with a big yellow sun overhead. She put you in our family. Elena stared at the drawing. The smallest figure was clearly meant to be Sofia, and the tallest was obviously her father. But the middle figure, the one with long hair and a dress, that was Elena. A woman Sofia had met for maybe 30 minutes was now part of her imaginary family. She's been through so much, Marco continued, his voice softer now. Losing her mother, the nightmares, the silence. But yesterday, after she met you, she ate a full dinner for the first time in months. She slept through the night without crying. Elena looked up from the phone to find Marco watching her intently. "What are you asking me, Mr. DeLuca?" "Sofia would like to see you again." "And you want me to what? Have a play date with a stranger's child?" "I want my daughter to be happy," Marco said simply. "For 6 months I've tried everything. Therapists, doctors, specialists. Nothing has helped. But one conversation with you, and she's drawing pictures of families again." Elena thought about the money he'd tried to give her, the way he'd manipulated her work schedule, the investigation into her background. This wasn't a casual request. "There's more to this," she said. "What aren't you telling me?" Marco was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. Finally, he spoke. "Sofia asked me if you could be her new mama." Elena's coffee cup slipped from her numb fingers, clattering against the saucer. "What?" Marco's expression remained calm, but she could see tension in the line of his jaw. Children say things when they're grieving, things they don't understand. "She asked you if I could be her new mother," Elena repeated slowly. "A woman she met once. For 30 minutes. Less than that, actually." Elena stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. A 7-year-old girl who had lost her mother was asking her father if a complete stranger could fill that void. It was heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time. "Mr. DeLuca, I'm not qualified to help your daughter. I'm barely keeping my own life together." "Sofia doesn't care about your qualifications," Marco said quietly. "She cares that you were kind to her when she was scared and alone. But I don't even remember. Perhaps your mind blocked out the memory to protect you." Marco's voice took on a harder edge. "My world is not safe, Miss Rossi. Even brief contact with my family can be dangerous." Elena felt that familiar chill. "Is that why my apartment was searched?" Marco went very still. "Your apartment was searched?" "The night after I supposedly met Sofia. Someone tore my place apart, but they didn't steal anything valuable. They were looking for something specific." Marco's face had gone completely expressionless, which somehow made him look more dangerous than any anger could have. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "When?" he asked. "2 nights ago. I came home around midnight and found everything destroyed." "And you called the police?" "Yes, but they said there wasn't much they could do." Marco was typing again, his fingers moving rapidly across the phone screen. Elena could see the barely controlled fury in his movements. "This is exactly why I try to keep Sofia isolated," he said without looking up. "Contact with us puts innocent people at risk." "So whoever did this, they were looking for information about you? Or about Sofia? Or they were trying to send me a message through you?" Marco finally looked up from his phone, and Elena saw something that looked like guilt in his dark eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Rossi. You helped my daughter, and you've been endangered because of it." Elena's mind was racing. "But why would they think I had information? I didn't even remember meeting her." "Because they saw you together. Someone is watching us. watching Sofia, and they documented your interaction. The same way Matteo did? Matteo works for me. He was there to protect Sofia, not to threaten her. Marco's voice was tight with controlled anger. Someone else was watching, someone who doesn't have her best interests at heart. Elena felt like she was drowning in information she didn't understand. What kind of enemies are we talking about here, Mr. DeLuca? Marco was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched on the table. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. I told you I run a family business. That business sometimes involves conflict with competitors. Elena stared at him. Family business, competitors, enemies who would target a child. The pieces were starting to form a picture she didn't want to see. You're in the Mafia. Marco didn't confirm or deny it, but his silence was answer enough. Elena stood up so quickly she nearly knocked over her chair. I have to go. Miss Rossi, no. She backed away from the table, her heart hammering. I can't be involved in this. I have a little brother to think about. I can't. Elena. Marco's voice was sharp now, commanding. Sit down. Something in his tone made her freeze. Not fear, exactly, but recognition of absolute authority. This was a man used to being obeyed without question. Please, he added, and the politeness somehow made it more of an order, not less. Elena looked around the cafe. The other customers were going about their business, oblivious to the conversation happening in the corner. Matteo and the other men were still by the door, watching but not approaching. She could run. She could walk out right now and never look back. But something kept her frozen in place. 5 more minutes, Marco said. Then you can leave if you want and we'll never contact you again. Slowly, Elena sat back down. Sofia is 7 years old, Marco continued. She's lost her mother, she barely speaks, and she has nightmares every night. She's innocent in all of this. So is my brother, Elena said fiercely. Luca is 13, and he has asthma, and he depends on me. I won't put him in danger. What if I could guarantee his safety? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. How? By giving him bodyguards? By moving him into your fortress? You said yourself that your world isn't safe. My world isn't safe for people who are unprepared for it, Marco corrected. But I protect what's mine, Miss Rossi. Always. Elena studied his face, trying to read the man behind the careful mask. What exactly are you asking me to do? Have dinner with Sofia, tonight, at my home. That's it? That's it. Let her see that you're real, that you didn't disappear. Let her know that not everyone she cares about will leave her. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of the child's drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands under a happy yellow sun. A little girl who had lost her mother and was clinging to the first person who'd shown her kindness. If I say yes, Elena said slowly, what happens to me? To Luca? Nothing happens to Luca. He continues his normal life, but with better medical care and security that he'll never notice. And me? Marco was quiet for a moment. That depends on what Sofia needs. I'm not going to be anyone's replacement mother. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to have dinner with a little girl who thinks you might care whether she's happy or sad. Elena looked at the photo of Sofia's drawing again. 3 figures holding hands. A family where Elena somehow belonged. 1 dinner, she said finally. 1 dinner. And if someone comes after me again because of this, they won't. Marco's voice carried absolute certainty. You're under my protection now, whether you want it or not. What happened to your apartment won't happen again. Elena wanted to ask how he could be so sure, but she was afraid of the answer. Instead, she nodded. 6 o'clock. Marco said, standing. "Matteo will pick you up." "I can drive myself." "No, you can't. My home isn't exactly listed in the phone book." Elena stood as well, suddenly nervous about what she'd agreed to. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself." Marco's expression softened slightly. "Sofia will be excited to see you." As they walked toward the cafe entrance, Elena caught a glimpse of herself in the window reflection. She looked pale, overwhelmed, like a woman who'd just stepped off the edge of a cliff. "Miss Rossi," Marco said as they reached the door, "thank you. For helping Sofia, for agreeing to dinner, for—" He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "For seeing a child instead of a complication." Elena looked up at him, this dangerous man with exhaustion in his eyes and scars on his hands. "Everyone deserves to be seen, Mr. DeLuca, even people like you." Something flickered across Marco's face, surprise maybe, or recognition. Then the mask was back in place. 6 o'clock, he repeated, and then he was gone, the black sedan pulling away into traffic. Elena stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. She'd agreed to have dinner with a Mafia boss and his traumatized daughter. She was now under the protection of a man who could probably have her disappeared with a phone call. And somehow, the most terrifying part was how much she was looking forward to meeting Sofia again. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Elena went home and changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something appropriate for dinner at a Mafia boss's house. What did one wear to such an occasion? Her black dress felt too formal, her jeans too casual. Finally, she settled on a simple blue sweater and dark pants, nice enough to show respect, comfortable enough to move in if she needed to run. At exactly 6 o'clock, Matteo knocked on her door. Elena was surprised to see him alone. "No bodyguards today?" she asked as they walked downstairs. "Today you're family," Matteo said simply. "Family doesn't need guards." Elena wasn't sure how she felt about being considered family by people she barely knew, but she didn't argue. The drive took 30 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that got progressively more expensive. Finally, they turned through a set of iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Marco DeLuca's house wasn't what Elena had expected. Instead of some gaudy mansion, it was a large but elegant stone home set back among mature trees. Lights glowed warmly in the windows, and flower boxes adorned the front porch. It looked like a family home. "Mr. DeLuca is waiting in the front hall," Matteo said as he opened Elena's door. Elena walked up the front steps on unsteady legs. Before she could knock, the door opened to reveal Marco. He'd changed out of his expensive suit into dark jeans and a simple white shirt. He looked younger, more approachable, but still utterly commanding. "Elena," he said, and she noticed he'd dropped the formal Miss Rossi. "Thank you for coming." Elena stepped inside and found herself in a warm, welcoming foyer. Fresh flowers sat on a side table, and children's artwork was displayed in expensive frames along the walls. "Sofia's work?" Elena asked, gesturing to the drawings. "Before," Marco said quietly. "She hasn't drawn anything since her mother died, except for the pictures of you." Elena studied the artwork. Colorful scenes of families and houses and animals, all signed with a careful Sofia in purple crayon. The girl had been happy once. "Papa?" The small voice came from the top of a curved staircase. Elena looked up to see a little girl peering through the banister rails. Sofia was small for 7, with dark hair like her father's and enormous brown eyes that seemed too old for her face. "Come down, Piccola," Marco said gently. "Elena is here." Sofia descended the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the railing. She was wearing a white dress with tiny flowers on it, and her hair was pulled back with a yellow ribbon. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she stopped a few feet away from Elena and just stared. Elena knelt down to Sofia's eye level. "Hi, Sofia. It's nice to see you again." Sofia didn't speak, but she stepped closer. Elena could see the wariness in her eyes, the careful way she held herself like she expected to be disappointed or hurt. "I like your dress," Elena said softly. "Yellow is a pretty color." Sofia looked down at her ribbon, then back at Elena. Very slowly, she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Elena without a word. Elena unfolded the paper carefully. It was another drawing, this one showing two figures sitting at a table with what looked like a birthday cake between them. Above the scene, Sofia had written Elena's dinner in careful letters. "This is beautiful," Elena said. "Is this what we're having for dinner tonight?" Sofia nodded, then stepped closer. Close enough that Elena could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the way her lower lip trembled slightly, like she was trying not to cry. "Sofia has been planning this dinner all day," Marco said from behind them. "She helped Mrs. Agnese cook your favorite foods." "How did you know what my favorite foods were?" Elena asked Sofia. Sofia glanced at her father, then back at Elena. In a voice so quiet Elena had to strain to hear it, she said, "Papa asked the nice lady at your work." Elena looked over Sofia's head at Marco. He shrugged slightly, looking almost embarrassed. "I wanted to make sure you'd enjoy dinner," he said. Elena turned back to Sofia. "What did you make for me?" "Spaghetti," Sofia whispered, "and garlic bread, and chocolate cake." "My absolute favorites," Elena said, and Sofia's face lit up with the first real smile Elena had seen from her. "Should we go eat?" Sofia surprised Elena by reaching out and taking her hand. Her small fingers were warm and trusting, and Elena felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Marco led them through the house to a dining room that was clearly meant for family meals, not formal entertaining. The table was set for 3, with Sofia's place between Elena's and Marco's. Candles flickered softly, and the whole room felt cozy and intimate. "Elena, this is Mrs. Agnese," Marco said as an older woman emerged from what Elena assumed was the kitchen. "She helps take care of Sofia in the house." Mrs. Agnese was probably in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked Elena up and down appraisingly, then seemed to reach some kind of conclusion. "So you're the young lady Sofia can't stop talking about," she said with a slight Italian accent. "She's been cooking for you all afternoon." "I hope I'm worth the effort," Elena said. "We'll see," Mrs. Agnesi said, but there was warmth in her voice. Dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Sofia sat close to Elena, occasionally whispering questions or observations. The spaghetti was perfect, the garlic bread was crispy and buttery, and the chocolate cake was rich enough to make Elena groan with pleasure. "This is incredible, Sofia," Elena said after her first bite of cake. "Did you really help make all this?" Sofia nodded proudly. "I stirred the sauce and I cracked the eggs and I didn't drop any shells in the bowl." "That's very impressive. I always get shells in the bowl when I crack eggs." "Mrs. Agnesi taught me the trick," Sofia said, then leaned closer to Elena. "You tap it on the counter twice, then use your thumbs." "I'll have to remember that." Throughout the meal, Elena found herself watching Marco. Away from the intimidating atmosphere of the coffee shop, with his daughter chattering beside him, he seemed like a different person. He was gentle with Sofia, patient when she took forever to decide how much cake she wanted, quick to wipe chocolate from her chin with a napkin. He was a good father. Whatever else he might be, he was a good father. After dinner, Sofia led Elena into the living room while Marco and Mrs. Agnese cleaned up, a domestic scene that felt surreal given what Elena knew about Marco's other life. "Do you want to see my room?" Sofia asked. "If your papa says it's okay." Sofia ran to the dining room. Elena could hear her asking permission in rapid Italian, then Marco's deep voice responding. Sofia came back beaming. "He said yes, come on." Sofia's room was every little girl's dream. Pink walls, a canopy bed with gauzy white curtains, shelves full of books and toys. But what caught Elena's attention were the empty spaces, spots on the walls where pictures had clearly been removed, a dresser top that looked too neat, too empty. "This is where Mama's pictures used to be," Sofia said quietly, following Elena's gaze. "Papa put them away because they made me cry." Elena's heart clenched. "Do you miss her?" Sofia nodded, sitting heavily on her bed. "Every day, but Papa says she's watching over me from heaven." "I bet she is, and I bet she's proud of what a brave, smart girl you are." Sofia looked up at Elena with those two old eyes. "Do you have a mama in heaven too?" Elena sat down beside Sofia on the bed. "Yes, I do. She died when I was older than you are now, but I still miss her sometimes." "Does it stop hurting?" Elena considered lying, giving Sofia some comfortable platitude, but those brown eyes deserved honesty. "It hurts less," Elena said carefully, "but it never goes away completely. The sadness just makes the room for other feelings too. Happy memories, love for the people who are still with you." Sofia was quiet for a moment, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. "Papa is sad all the time now. He misses your mama too, and he's scared something will happen to me." Elena looked at Sofia with surprise. 7 years old, and she understood more than anyone realized. "Papas worry about their little girls," Elena said. "That's part of loving someone." "Do you worry about anyone?" "My little brother, Luca. He's 13, and sometimes he gets sick, and I worry about him all the time." Sofia's face brightened. "I could draw him a picture. Pictures make people feel better." "I think he'd love that." Sofia jumped up and ran to her desk, pulling out paper and crayons. Elena watched her begin to draw. A house with 2 stick figures standing outside, one tall and one shorter. "That's you and Luca," Sofia explained without looking up, "and this is the sun making sure you're both warm and safe." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. This child had lost her mother, was clearly aware of dangers she shouldn't have to think about, and yet her first instinct was to create something beautiful for a stranger. "Sofia," Elena said carefully, "why did you ask your papa if I could be your new mama?" Sofia stopped coloring and looked up. "Because you smiled at me. And you weren't scared of the rain or the dark or the men in suits. Lots of people aren't scared of those things. But they're scared of Papa," Sofia said matter-of-factly. "Everyone is scared of Papa except Mrs. Agnese and Matteo and me. But you looked right at him, and you weren't scared at all." Elena thought about the coffee shop, about the way Marco's presence had commanded attention and respect from everyone around him. She had been scared, terrified actually, but maybe she'd hidden it better than she thought. "I was a little scared," Elena admitted, "but you came to dinner anyway." "Yes. Because of me?" Elena looked at Sofia's earnest face, at the hopeful way she was waiting for an answer. "Yes, because of you." Sofia finished her drawing and handed it to Elena. "This is so you remember that someone thinks you're nice." Elena looked at the picture. 2 figures under a bright yellow sun, surrounded by flowers and hearts. At the bottom, in careful letters, Sofia had written, "Elena and Luca are loved." "Thank you," Elena whispered. This is the most beautiful present anyone has ever given me." Sofia beamed, then surprised Elena by climbing into her lap for a hug. She was small and warm and smelled like chocolate cake and children's shampoo. "Will you come back?" Sofia asked into Elena's shoulder. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the trust and hope in that small body pressed against hers. She thought about Marco downstairs, about the dangerous world Sofia lived in, about her own fears and responsibilities. But mostly she thought about a 7-year-old girl who had asked a stranger to be her mother because that stranger had shown her kindness during a moment of fear. "Yes," Elena said softly. "I'll come back." Elena didn't sleep well that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sofia's hopeful face, heard her small voice asking if Elena would come back. She'd made a promise to a child, a promise that scared her more than any threat from Marco's enemies. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her manager at the grocery store. "Need you to cover the early shift. Jenny called in sick." Elena dragged herself out of bed and got ready for another day of normal life, scanning barcodes and stocking shelves and pretending she hadn't spent the previous evening in a Mafia boss's dining room being hugged by his traumatized daughter. But as she walked to the bus stop, Elena noticed things she'd never paid attention to before. The way certain cars seemed to appear in multiple locations along her route. How a man in a coffee shop kept glancing in her direction while pretending to read his newspaper. Marco had said she was under his protection now. Apparently, that protection came with surveillance. The realization should have been terrifying, but instead, Elena felt oddly comforted. For the first time in 3 years, since her parents died, she wasn't completely alone in the world. The shift at the grocery store passed slowly. Elena found herself thinking about Sofia's drawings, about the empty spaces on her bedroom walls where her mother's pictures used to hang, about Marco's gentle patience with his daughter and the exhaustion that never left his eyes. Around noon, Elena was restocking the cereal aisle when her manager, Tim, approached looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Elena, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Elena's blood went cold. "Who is it?" "Some guy in an expensive suit. He's waiting by customer service." Elena's hand shook as she set down the box of cornflakes she'd been holding. Had something happened to Sofia? To Marco? Or was this one of their enemies coming after her despite Marco's promises of protection? She made her way to the front of the store, her heart pounding. But when she saw the man waiting for her, relief flooded through her system. It was Matteo. "Miss Rossi," he said formally. "I apologize for interrupting your work, but there's a situation that requires your attention." "What kind of situation?" Matteo glanced around the store, noting the curious looks from customers and employees. "Perhaps we could speak outside?" Elena followed him out to the parking lot where the familiar black sedan waited. The windows were tinted, but Elena could see a small shape in the back seat. "Is that Sofia?" "She's having what Mrs. Agnese calls a difficult day," Matteo said carefully. "She woke up asking for you, and when we explained that you were at work, she became inconsolable." Elena could hear crying now, muffled but heartbroken, coming from inside the car. "Where's Marco?" "Dealing with a business emergency. He asked me to handle the situation." "By bringing a 7-year-old to my workplace?" "By bringing her to the person she's asking for," Matteo said simply. "She hasn't stopped crying for 3 hours, Miss Rossi. Mrs. Agnese is at her wit's end." Elena looked toward the car, where Sofia's crying had gotten louder. Through the window, she could see the little girl's face pressed against the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't just leave work, Matteo. I need this job." Your manager has been compensated for the rest of your shift, Matteo said, and for any inconvenience this might cause. Elena stared at him. You people can't just buy your way out of every problem. We can try, Matteo said with the ghost of a smile. But in this case, we're not trying to solve a problem. We're trying to help a little girl who's in pain. Elena looked back at the car, at Sofia's desperate face in the window. The child had lost her mother, lived in a world of constant danger, and had somehow decided that Elena, a stranger, was safe. How could Elena walk away from that kind of trust? 5 minutes, she said, then I have to get back to work. Matteo opened the car door, and Sofia practically launched herself into Elena's arms. She was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, her small body shaking with the force of her grief. Shh, sweetheart. It's okay, Elena murmured, holding Sofia tight. I'm here. What's wrong? I thought you weren't real, Sofia hiccuped against Elena's shoulder. I thought I dreamed you like I dream about Mama sometimes. Elena's heart broke a little more. I'm real, Sofia. I'm right here. But you left. You didn't say goodbye. Elena pulled back to look at Sofia's tear-stained face. Honey, I had to go home last night, but that doesn't mean I disappeared forever. Promise? Elena brushed tears from Sofia's cheeks with her thumbs. I promise I'm real, and I promise I'll always say goodbye before I leave. Okay? Sofia nodded, then buried her face in Elena's neck again. I was scared. What were you scared of? That Papa would put your pictures away too. Elena closed her eyes, understanding flooding through her. Sofia had lost her mother, and then all the pictures of her mother had been hidden away to stop Sofia's tears. In a 7-year-old's mind, Elena disappearing without explanation meant she might be erased from Sofia's life the same way. Your Papa wouldn't do that, Elena said softly. And even if he did, you'd still remember me, wouldn't you? Just like you remember your Mama even when you can't see her pictures. Sofia pulled back and looked at Elena seriously. Do you remember your Mama even without pictures? Every day. What do you remember? Elena thought for a moment. I remember how she smelled like vanilla and flowers. I remember how she sang while she cooked dinner. And I remember how she always kissed my forehead before bed and told me I was brave and strong and loved. Sofia's eyes widened. Mama did that too. She said I was her brave little princess. Because you are brave, Sofia. So brave. Sofia's tears had stopped, but she was still clinging to Elena like a lifeline. Over the child's head, Elena could see Matteo watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. Miss Rossi, he said carefully, Sofia was hoping you might be able to spend the afternoon with her. Mr. DeLuca's business meeting may run late, and Mrs. Agnese has a doctor's appointment she can't reschedule. Elena looked down at Sofia, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. What about school? It's a teacher workday, Sofia said quickly. No school today. Elena glanced back at the grocery store where she could see Tim watching through the window. She'd already missed an hour of her shift, and she needed every dollar she could earn. But Sofia was looking at her like Elena was the answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered into her pillow at night. Okay, Elena said, but just for the afternoon. Sofia's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Really. But we need to call your papa and make sure it's okay with him. Matteo already called him, Sofia said innocently. Papa said if you said yes, we could go get ice cream and go to the park and maybe see the ducks at the pond. Elena looked at Matteo, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. You were that confident I'd say yes? I was that confident you care about Sofia's happiness, he said simply. They spent the afternoon at Morrison Park, feeding ducks and pushing Sofia on the swings and eating ice cream cones that dripped down their hands in the warm autumn sunshine. Elena had forgotten what it felt like to spend time with a child, the wonder Sofia found in simple things, the way she laughed at Elena's terrible jokes, the unconscious way she reached for Elena's hand when they walked. It felt dangerously like family. As the sun began to set, they made their way back to the car. Sofia had been quiet for the last few minutes, and Elena could see exhaustion beginning to catch up with her. "Elena," Sofia said as Matteo helped her into the car seat, "will you tell Papa that I was good today?" "You were very good today. Why wouldn't you tell him yourself?" Sofia looked down at her hands. "Sometimes when I'm sad and I cry, Papa gets that look on his face. Like he's sad too, but trying not to show me." Elena felt that familiar ache in her chest. "Your Papa loves you very much, Sofia. When people love each other, they feel sad when the other person is sad. It's not your fault." "But I don't want Papa to be sad because of me." Elena knelt down beside the car so she was at Sofia's eye level. "Listen to me, sweetheart. Your Papa isn't sad because of you. He's sad because he misses your mama too, and because he wishes he could take away your hurt. But you know what?" Sofia shook her head. "I think you make him happy too. I saw the way he looked at you last night when you were showing me your drawings. He smiled, really smiled, and his whole face changed." Sofia considered this. "Really?" "Really. You're the most important thing in the world to your Papa. Never forget that." Sofia nodded solemnly, then surprised Elena by leaning forward and kissing her cheek. "Thank you for spending the day with me." "Thank you for letting me." The drive to Elena's apartment was quiet, Sofia dozing in her car seat while Elena watched the city pass by outside. When they pulled up to her building, Elena was surprised to see Marco's car already waiting. He got out as they approached, his expression unreadable. Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes quickly scanned the street for potential threats. "Papa!" Sofia called sleepily from her car seat. Marco's entire demeanor changed the moment he saw his daughter. The hard lines around his eyes softened, and he smiled as he unbuckled Sofia from her seat. "Did you have a good day, Piccola?" "The best day," Sofia said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Elena taught me how to make duck sounds, and we had chocolate ice cream, and I went really high on the swings." "That does sound like the best day," Marco said, but his eyes were on Elena. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Matteo told me about this morning. I'm sorry Sofia interrupted your work." "She was upset," Elena said simply. "I couldn't just ignore that." Marco studied her face for a moment. "Most people could." "Well, I'm not most people, apparently." Something flickered across Marco's expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "No," he said softly. "You're not." Sofia had fallen asleep against her father's shoulder, her small hand fisted in his shirt. Elena found herself staring at the picture they made, this dangerous man holding his daughter like she was made of spun glass. "I should go up," Elena said, suddenly aware of how domestic the scene felt, how easily she could get used to being part of it. "Elena," Marco said as she turned toward her building. "Yeah." "Sofia asked if you could have dinner with us again. Tomorrow night." Elena paused. "Marco, I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "I know my life isn't normal, and I know asking you to be part of it isn't fair. But Sofia has been happier in the last 2 days than she's been in months." Elena looked at Sofia's sleeping face, peaceful in her father's arms. "What happens when she gets too attached? When she starts thinking of me as something I can't be?" "I don't know," Marco admitted. "But what's the alternative? Keeping her locked away from everyone who might care about her? Never letting her trust anyone again?" Elena thought about her own life after her parents died, the isolation, the fear of getting close to anyone who might leave. Was that really better than the risk of loving someone and losing them? "One more dinner," she said finally. One more dinner. As Elena climbed the stairs to her apartment, she could hear Marco's car pulling away. She let herself in and stood in her small living room, looking around at her modest furniture and secondhand decorations. 2 days ago, this had been her whole world. Now it felt like a costume she was wearing, like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't sure she was anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today. Sofia is sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. M." Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "She's a special little girl." The response came quickly. "She thinks you're special too." Elena set down her phone and tried to ignore the way her heart was racing. She was getting too involved, too attached. Sofia wasn't her daughter, and Marco wasn't her family, no matter how much it was starting to feel that way. But as she got ready for bed, Elena found herself looking forward to tomorrow night's dinner in a way that scared her. She was falling for them, both of them, and she wasn't sure she'd be able to walk away when this arrangement inevitably came to an end. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Elena was getting ready for work when someone knocked on her door. She looked through the peephole and saw a man she didn't recognize, tall, thin, with cold eyes and an expensive suit. Everything Marco had told her about his enemies came flooding back. Elena didn't open the door. Instead, she called through it, "Who is it?" "Miss Rossi, my name is Vincent Romano. I'd like to speak with you about Marco DeLuca." Elena's blood went cold. She pressed her back against the door, her mind racing. Marco had said his enemies might try to use her to get to him. Was this one of them? "I don't know anyone by that name," Elena called back. The man laughed, and the sound made Elena's skin crawl. "Miss Rossi, we both know that's not true. I saw you having dinner with him 2 nights ago. I saw you spending yesterday afternoon with his daughter." Elena's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number Marco had given her. "For emergencies only," he'd said. "I have nothing to say to you," Elena called through the door. "Perhaps not, but I have things to say to you. About the kind of man Marco DeLuca really is. About what happened to his wife. About what will happen to anyone who gets too close to his family." Elena's finger hovered over Marco's number. Was this man threatening her or trying to warn her? "Marco DeLuca is a killer, Miss Rossi. He's destroyed families, ended lives, built his empire on blood and fear. Is that really the kind of man you want to trust with your safety? With your life?" Elena pressed the call button. Marco answered on the first ring. "Elena, what's wrong?" "There's a man outside my door," Elena whispered. "He says his name is Vincent Romano. He's asking about you." The silence on the other end of the line was more terrifying than any shout could have been. "Lock your door," Marco said, his voice deadly calm. "Don't let him in. Don't talk to him. Don't even look at him. I'm sending people now." "Marco, Elena, listen to me very carefully. Vincent Romano is a dangerous man who wants to hurt me by hurting people I care about. Do exactly what I tell you, and you'll be safe." People I care about. The word sent a strange thrill through Elena's chest despite her fear. "Miss Rossi?" Vincent Romano called through the door. "I know you're listening. Marco DeLuca's protection comes with a price. Ask him what happened to the last woman who tried to be a mother to Sofia DeLuca." Elena's breath caught. The last woman? Sofia's mother? "What happened to his wife, Marco?" Elena whispered into the phone. The silence stretched so long Elena thought the call had dropped. "I'll explain everything tonight," Marco said finally. "Just stay away from him until my men arrive." How long? They're already in the building. Elena heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy and purposeful. Then voices, Romano saying something she couldn't make out, then other voices, more authoritative. Mr. Romano, she heard someone say, you need to come with us. This isn't over, Romano called through Elena's door. Ask Marco about Maria, Miss Rossi. Ask him how his wife really died. Then the footsteps were retreating, and Elena was alone with her racing heart and 1,000 new questions. She stayed pressed against the door until her phone rang again. It's Matteo, the familiar voice said. Romano is gone. You're safe. Elena opened the door carefully. Matteo stood in the hallway, looking calm but alert. Behind him were 2 other men Elena didn't recognize. Are you all right? Matteo asked. Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. What did he want? To scare you, to plant doubts about Marco's intentions. Matteo's expression was grim. He succeeded, didn't he? Elena thought about Romano's words, about the implications behind them. Is it true about Sofia's mother? That's not my story to tell, Matteo said carefully, but I will say this. Marco DeLuca is a good man living in a dark world. Sometimes the darkness touches people he cares about, despite his best efforts to protect them. Elena stared at him. That's not exactly reassuring. No, Matteo agreed. It's not, but it's honest. Elena looked down the hallway where Romano had been standing just minutes before. This is what Marco meant when he said his world wasn't safe, isn't it? Yes. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of Sofia's trusting face, of the way she'd fallen asleep in her father's arms the night before. What am I supposed to do with that information? That's up to you, Matteo said, but I'll tell you what I told Marco when he was debating whether to let Sofia get attached to you. What? Some things are worth the risk. After Matteo left, Elena sat on her couch and stared at the wall where Romano had been standing. Her safe, simple life had been shattered the moment she'd shown kindness to a little girl in the rain. But as scared as she was, Elena found herself thinking about Sofia's smile, about the way Marco's eyes softened when he looked at his daughter, about the family they could be if Elena was brave enough to stay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. Mrs. Agnese helped me write this. I drew you another picture for tonight. It has all my favorite things in it, and you are one of them. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Then she texted back, I can't wait to see it. Whatever Vincent Romano had wanted her to know about Marco's past, whatever dangers might be waiting for them, Elena realized she wasn't ready to walk away. Not from Sofia and, if she was being honest with herself, not from Marco either. She was in love with them, both of them. And love, Elena had learned, was always worth the risk. That evening, Elena arrived at Marco's house to find it transformed. Candles flickered in every window, soft music played from hidden speakers, and the smell of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Sofia met her at the door wearing a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine. Elena, come see what we made for you. Sofia grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her toward the dining room, where the table was set with fine china and fresh flowers. But what made Elena's breath catch was the centerpiece, a cake decorated with rainbow frosting and covered in plastic figurines. It's a family cake, Sofia explained proudly. See? There's you, and there's me, and there's Papa, and there's even Mrs. Agnese and Matteo because they're family too. Elena looked at the little plastic figures arranged around the cake like they were holding hands. A perfect little family with her right in the middle of it. It's beautiful, Sofia, Elena said, her voice slightly hoarse with emotion. Papa helped with the frosting, but I did all the decorating myself, Sofia said. And I made something else for you, too." She ran to the sideboard and came back with a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a photo album, handmade with construction paper and ribbon. "It's pictures of our family," Sofia explained as Elena opened it. "Mrs. Anesi printed them from Papa's phone." Elena flipped through the pages, seeing herself captured in moments she'd barely been aware of. Playing with Sofia at the park, laughing over ice cream, sitting at this very table just 2 nights ago. In every photo, she looked happy in a way she hadn't in years. "This is incredible, sweetheart," Elena said. "Now you can't forget us," Sofia said seriously, "even if you have to go away." Elena looked up to find Marco standing in the doorway, watching them. He was wearing dark jeans and a white button-down shirt. Casual, but still impossibly elegant. But it was the expression on his face that made Elena's heart race. Tender, hopeful, and utterly vulnerable. "Dinner's ready," he said softly. The meal was perfect. Tender chicken, roasted vegetables, and bread warm from the oven. But Elena barely tasted any of it. She was too aware of Marco sitting across from her, of the careful way he was watching her reactions, of the questions neither of them was asking. Sofia chattered throughout dinner, telling stories about her day and asking Elena a dozen questions about her childhood. But even she seemed to sense the tension between the adults. After cake, which was almost too beautiful to cut, Sofia started yawning over her milk. "I think someone needs to get ready for bed," Marco said gently. "But Elena just got here," Sofia protested. "Elena will still be here when you're in your pajamas," Marco promised. Sofia looked between them, then seemed to make some kind of decision. "Elena, will you help me get ready for bed, like a real mama would?" Elena's heart clenched. "If your papa says it's okay." Marco nodded, his expression unreadable. Helping Sofia get ready for bed was both wonderful and heartbreaking. The little girl showed Elena where everything was. Her toothbrush, her favorite pajamas, the special blanket she'd had since she was a baby. "This was Mama's when she was little," Sofia said, holding up a worn pink bunny. "Papa gave it to me after she went to heaven." Elena touched the bunny's soft fur, imagining a young Maria cuddling it the same way Sofia did now. "It's very special." "I want you to meet her someday," Sofia said, as Elena helped her into her pajamas. "When I go to heaven, I'm going to tell Mama all about you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "That's very sweet, Sofia, but you're not going to heaven for a very long time." "How do you know?" "Because you have too much living to do first. Too many pictures to draw, and cakes to bake, and ducks to feed." Sofia giggled. "And too many hugs to give?" "Definitely too many hugs to give." Sofia climbed into her bed and patted the space beside her. "Will you read me a story?" Elena sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the book Sofia handed her. A fairy tale about a princess who saved her kingdom with kindness instead of magic. As she read, Sofia snuggled closer, her small hand resting on Elena's arm. By the end of the story, Sofia's eyes were drooping. Elena started to get up, but Sofia's hand tightened on her arm. "Elena, are you going to marry Papa?" Elena's breath caught. "Sofia?" "I heard Mrs. Agnese talking to Matteo. She said Papa looks at you the way he used to look at Mama." Elena didn't know what to say to that. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that the adult world was complicated, that love wasn't always enough, that sometimes people had to make impossible choices? "Your Papa and I are friends, sweetheart. Good friends who both care about you very much." Sofia considered this. "But you like him, right? The way grown-ups like each other?" Elena thought about lying, about giving Sofia some safe, non-committal answer, but those brown eyes deserved honesty. "Yes," Elena said softly. I like him very much. Sofia smiled sleepily. Good, because he likes you too. I can tell. How can you tell? Because he doesn't look tired when you're here. And he smiles with his eyes now, not just his mouth. Elena kissed Sofia's forehead, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and innocence. Sweet dreams, little princess. Sweet dreams, Elena, and thank you. For what? For making our family bigger. Elena's heart was too full for words as she turned off Sofia's bedside lamp and crept out of the room. She found Marco waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets. She's asleep, Elena said softly. Thank you for all of it. Dinner, bedtime, the photo album. She's been planning this evening for days. They walked downstairs together, the house quiet around them. Elena could feel the weight of unasked questions, of Vincent Romano's words echoing in her mind. Marco, she said, as they reached the living room, we need to talk. His expression immediately became guarded. About what Romano said. About what Romano said. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. What do you want to know? The truth, about your wife, about how she died. Marco walked to the fireplace and stood with his back to her, staring into the cold grate. Maria was killed because of me, because of who I am and the life I chose. Elena's heart sank, but she forced herself to ask the next question. How? A car bomb, meant for me, but I was running late that day. Sofia was with Mrs. Ignacy, thank God. Maria was... Marco's voice broke slightly. She was alone. Elena closed her eyes, imagining the horror of it. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that she died because she loved me. Elena could hear the self-hatred in his voice, the guilt that had been eating at him for months. It wasn't your fault, Marco. He turned to face her then, his eyes dark with pain. Wasn't it? I knew what my life entailed. I knew the risks. But I married her anyway, had a child with her anyway, because I was selfish enough to want something good in my life. You loved her. Love isn't always enough, Elena. Sometimes love gets people killed. Elena understood now why he'd been so resistant to letting Sofia get attached to her, why he lived like a man under siege. Is that why you tried to keep Sofia isolated? To protect her? I tried to keep her safe, but I can't protect her from everything. Not from grief, not from the nightmares, not from needing someone to love her the way Maria did. And now she's attached to me. And now she's attached to you, Marco agreed, which means you're in danger. Which means I've failed to protect another person. He stopped himself, but Elena heard what he'd almost said. Another person you what, Marco? Marco looked at her for a long moment, his expression raw and vulnerable. Another person I love. Elena's breath caught. Marco. I know it's insane, he said quickly. I know you've known us for 3 days. I know my life is complicated and dangerous and not what any sane person would choose, but Sofia isn't the only one who's gotten attached to you, Elena. Elena stared at him, this powerful man who was laying his heart bare in his fire-lit living room. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm in love with you. Against my better judgment, against every rule I've made for myself since Maria died, I'm in love with you. Elena felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Marco, I know it's too fast. I know it doesn't make sense, but I can't help it, Elena. You've brought light back into this house, laughter back into my daughter's life. You've made me remember what it feels like to hope for something beyond just survival. Elena thought about Vincent Romano's warnings, about the danger that came with loving Marco DeLuca. But she also thought about Sofia's drawings, about the way Marco's face changed when he looked at his daughter, about the family they could be if she was brave enough to reach for it. "I'm scared, Marco," she said honestly. "So am I. What if something happens to me like it happened to Maria?" "Then I'll never forgive myself," Marco said simply. "But Elena, what if nothing happens? What if we have years together? What if Sofia gets to grow up with a mother who loves her? What if I get to wake up every morning next to the woman who brought my family back to life?" Elena looked around the living room, at the photos of Sofia on the mantelpiece, at the comfortable furniture that spoke of family evenings, at the man standing in front of her with his heart in his eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. Marco closed his eyes like he was in pain. "Elena, I love you, and I love Sofia, and I want to be part of this family if you'll have me." Marco crossed the room in 2 strides and cupped her face in his scarred hands. "Are you sure? Really sure? Because once you say yes, there's no going back. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, and I'll protect you with my life." Elena looked into his dark eyes and saw her future there, chaotic and dangerous, and absolutely worth the risk. "I'm sure." Marco kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of promise. Elena melted into him, into the warmth and safety of his arms, into the impossible hope of forever. When they finally broke apart, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Elena laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Did you just propose to me?" "I did. Marry me, Elena. Be Sofia's mother and my wife and the center of our world." Elena thought about her small apartment, her minimum wage jobs, her quiet life that had been turned upside down by a little girl's plea for a new mama. "Yes," she said, "yes, I'll marry you." From upstairs came a sound that made them both freeze. A door opening, small feet on the stairs. "Papa?" Sofia's sleepy voice called. "I heard talking." Elena and Marco separated quickly as Sofia appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing?" Sofia asked. Marco looked at Elena, a question in his eyes. Elena nodded. "Elena and I were talking about our family," Marco said gently. "About how much we love you." Sofia perked up, suddenly more awake. And Elena has agreed to stay with us forever," Marco said, "if that's what you want." Sofia's face lit up like the 4th of July. "Really? Forever and ever?" "Forever and ever," Elena confirmed. Sofia ran to them, and they caught her in a 3-way hug that felt like coming home. As Marco's arms came around both of them, Elena realized that this was what she'd been searching for her entire life. Not just love, but belonging. Not just a relationship, but a family. "I told you Elena was special, Papa," Sofia said happily. "I told you she could be my new mama." Marco kissed the top of Sofia's head, then looked at Elena over their daughter's head. "You were right, Piccola. Elena is very special." 6 months later, Elena stood in the garden behind Marco's house, wearing her mother's wedding dress that had been carefully altered to fit. Sofia walked ahead of her, scattering rose petals and beaming with pride in her yellow flower girl dress. DeLuca walked beside Elena, healthy and strong thanks to the best medical care Marco's money could buy. He'd been skeptical at first about Elena marrying into a crime family, but Marco had won him over by treating him like the little brother he'd always wanted. At the altar, Marco waited in a dark suit, flanked by Matteo and 2 other men Elena had come to think of as family. Mrs. Agnese sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. It was a small ceremony, just family and the closest friends. But it felt perfect. As Elena reached Marco's side, he took her hands and whispered, "Are you ready for this?" Elena looked out at the faces surrounding them. Luca grinning from the front row, Mrs. Agnese crying happy tears, Sofia bouncing on her toes with excitement. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a broken-down diner to this garden where she was about to promise forever to a man who had taught her that love was always worth the risk. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Elena whispered back. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Sofia cheered so loudly that everyone laughed. Marco kissed Elena like she was his salvation, and Elena kissed him back like he was her home. Later, as they danced to their first song as husband and wife, Elena caught sight of Sofia drawing at a nearby table. She was creating another family picture, this one showing 3 figures under a house with a rainbow overhead and the words, "The DeLuca family," written in careful letters at the bottom. "What are you thinking about?" Marco asked, following her gaze. "Just how perfect this all is," Elena said. "How right it feels. Even with all the complications, all the dangers." Elena looked up at her husband, and saw the man who had risked everything to give his daughter a mother, who had opened his heavily guarded heart to let Elena in. "Especially with all the complications," Elena said. "Perfect isn't safe or simple, Marco. Perfect is messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for." Marco spun her around, laughing, and Elena felt like she could fly. This was her family now, chaotic and beautiful and completely hers. She was Elena DeLuca, wife to Marco and mother to Sofia, and she had never been happier in her life. As the song ended, Sofia ran up to them with her new drawing. "Look what I made," she said proudly. "It's our family, and we're all happy, and the rainbow means we'll always be together." Elena knelt down to Sofia's level and pulled her into a hug. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Just like our family." Sofia hugged her back fiercely. "I love you, Mama Elena." "I love you too, baby girl, forever and always." As Marco wrapped his arms around both of them, Elena closed her eyes and marveled at how much her life had changed. 3 days after meeting a little girl in the rain, she'd found her forever family. Love had found a way, just like it always did. And in Sofia's drawing, 3 figures held hands under a bright rainbow, surrounded by hearts and flowers and all the hope in the world.